Bill, what's happening, buddy?
Good to be back, Jared. How
Tell
are
you what,
you, my friend?
we got a new guy here in the middle of us. I say in the
Yeah,
middle. Does everybody see it that way?
I think I see to the right, but hey, it's
It's all different, right?
a familiar face to us at least.
Well, if you guys are just listening to the audio, you're wondering what in the hell we're talking about. But no, on the screen here with us is Caleb Gustner. Caleb is director of our emerging groups department. And Bill, today we're going to get some insight from Caleb, you as well, but just talk all things basically related to, I'll call it just the release, if you will, of kind of the emerging groups department, that we just recently unveiled, I guess, here at our firm, and just talk about what it does, why we did it, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah,
Cool to go?
I think it's one of those things, Jared, where one of our core values is always move forward, always try to find ways to do things better. And, I think that I'm excited to have Caleb kind of unpack what it is, because I do think it's something that makes our firm better. I think it's something that can make our clients' lives better. I'm excited to chat through it because it's really, really a cool deal, in my opinion.
Perfect. Okay, Caleb, I appreciate you joining, man. Appreciate you bearing with us for however long this takes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Always happy to jump on here.
Well, let's do it, man. Maybe we'll just throw it to you right off the bat, right? As kind of spearheading this emerging groups department, being the director of it. Why don't you just unpack, why we kind of created this groups department, what it is, why we did it, and why now, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think probably a year and a half ago, Bill and I were having conversations around just the different obstacles and challenges group practice owners face. And to you guys listening, saying, well, what's a group, right? To us, we see a group as a practice owner or partnership group that owns 3 locations or more. And typically they're looking to scale, right? Not necessarily talking about mama pop dentists. We love those guys too, right? I have a bunch of clients that have 1, 2 locations where maybe the owner or sole provider is working clinically. These client avatars are looking to scale a dental portfolio, right? And so what we have noticed and unpacked over the years of working with them is just there's different challenges and obstacles that these guys face, right? Looking at enterprise rankings and noticing, hey, we've got to monitor this practice versus this practice, and hey, we're doing a de novo while also doing an acquisition, right? Just the challenges that these guys face. Completely different ballpark we're playing in here, right? And so what we wanted to do is niche down a little bit further, right? We're a dental-specific CPA firm. Wanted to bring value to our clients in really knowing and understanding the group space, the challenges, the obstacles they face, really looking to provide value to those clients looking to grow and scale.
Yeah, so it's the niche within the niche, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, you kind of said this, Caleb. We're not going away from, we call them solos, right? Which means anything less than 3. Like groups is 3 and up. Solos would be anything less than 3. Again, that's a specific department that we've got too, right? You've got emerging groups and solos. So not going away from solos a bit, just getting really niche within the niche on the group side. So you hit on a couple things there. You hit on the 3 practices, but also maybe the challenges that these dental practice owners, right, face that are different than maybe a 1 location, 2 location. Bill, why don't you unpack maybe a couple examples, like what you did a little bit, Caleb, but a little bit more in depth. What problems are they facing, that sort of thing, that are different?
Well, typically it's just like any business that's growing and scaling. The conversations are different and the challenges are different. And so, historically what we've seen is, let's say you have a doctor who's really good and has a really nice practice. We've kind of gotten to where we call that the flagship practice. Usually has really nice financial metrics. A lot of times that doctor is the primary producer, has pretty decent systems and processes that probably have developed over time. But as they go along, they say, hey, I've got free cash flow. I'm doing really good here. I think I could do this again. And so they go buy a second practice. And typically that doctor's kind of bouncing around from that first one to the second one, still producing, filling in gaps, and for the most part, he or she's able to be there relatively frequently in each location. And so they can kind of tend to grow 2 locations pretty well and still show good operations. What we tend to see is by the time they get to that third practice, that's kind of the everywhere at once conundrum. You tend to find that those docs aren't able to be in all locations. And so what happens is they don't really have the proper infrastructure that they can just copy and paste and put good managers in place. So, they kind of will get, say, a third location, and it will just be run very differently than what the first one was. And so then sometimes they'll shift their focus to that third one, and all of a sudden you'll see the first one will kind of start to suffer a little bit. So really, it's the challenge of building scalable infrastructure so you can truly copy and paste, not just the process and procedures, but also the financial results. And that's where we tend to see a lot of folks get kind of sideways, is they just haven't taken the time, energy, and effort to build out that infrastructure. And where we feel like we fit in there is the financial infrastructure of a group practice that's growing and trying to scale.
A silly analogy that just went through my head is kind of like you go to church in the kids' nursery, right? And you see the kids that are crying, and you got one person that's holding one baby here and one baby here, and you still got one on the floor crying. You're like, what do I do? Yep. Well, you need some help, right? You need some help. And that's kind of like looking at these practices. Like, it's really hard to, maybe you get that flagship, you add that other one, you can kind of juggle, hold them both in your arms, if you will. But we get that third one, you need some help, really, to get some, strategy. Can't grow another arm, you know what I mean? So you got to get some strategy to figure out how you're going to help that other one on the deal. You kind of define what those challenges are, what that looks like, 3 practices and up. Like, talk about a little bit, Caleb, like, what are the services that you're providing there in that emerging groups department?
Yeah, so Bill hit the nail on the head, right, in talking about building out infrastructure to grow and scale a portfolio. And that is very true in the financial component of scaling a dental portfolio, really scaling any business, right? We see just the need of the financial infrastructure that comes alongside building out a portfolio. And so typically when most people think of a CPA relationship, you think of 2 components, right? You think of a bookkeeper who's doing the books, reconciling, doing the day-to-day, and then you think of your CPA who's typically doing taxes. For better or for worse, they're putting together a tax return. How we view our department is we offer services that are going to build out an infrastructure that's going to scale with you. What I mean by that is how we view a finance department to an emerging group is really there are 3 main seats that come into play when we think about the needs of an emerging group. One is the bookkeeper, right? That same seat that you had when you were what we deem a solo, right? Someone who's in the day-to-day, taking care of the QuickBooks, taking care of the Sage, whatever the case may be on your accounting platform. The second component to that is a controller, right? And oftentimes in our industry, right, we throw the term controller around. In the dental space, that term is not thrown around a whole lot, right? That's a very finance term. Oftentimes you'll hear a lot of firms say that they have this fractional CFO service. And I'm going to get to fractional CFO here in just a second because that is a huge component of our department. But I want to pause here and really unpack the difference in a fractional controller, well, how we view a fractional controller and a fractional CFO. So in the space, right, in the world today, you hear this saturated term of fractional CFO.
Kind of a buzzword, right?
Yeah, very, very high level buzzword of, hey, pay us, we are your fractional CFO. Well, I'm going to pause here and I really want to walk through the infrastructure of finance department, right? So we got our bookkeeper who's taking care of the books, getting that squared away. What we view as a controller or a fractional controller is oftentimes what most, let's say, consultants will call a fractional CFO service. And what that controller is really doing, diving into the financial metrics, overseeing cash management, ensuring that the finances are in order and everything is on a roadmap to success, right? I'm going to say it's very backwards looking. It's a historic looking view in your finance department. They're focused on the past. Where we see the need in a scaling portfolio, right, is forward looking, right? And that's where or fractional CFO service comes into play. To us, a fractional CFO, what they should be delivering to you is forward-looking data. So forecasting, cash flow forecasting, 90-day, 12-month, 5-year, cap table analysis, and really leading not only the financial components of your organization, but sitting in as a part of your leadership team, right? So when we are helping organizations overcome challenges, we are coming from that finance seat, but we need to have interplay with your marketing team. We need to have interplay with your ops team. We need to have interplay with you as the owner, right? Bill, we talk about this all the time. We're actually talking about this with a client today, right? The 3 components of business: sales, ops, finance, right? And we fit in as a component of that, but really we need to have interplay in that. And so, I think that's one of the diluted terms that we hear, like I mentioned earlier, on fractional CFO. If you're a fractional CFO or looking at, a service for that name, if they are not delivering forward-looking key components of, hey, if we add a 4th practice, what is that going to do? Hey, if we go buy this piece of equipment, do we finance it? Do we use cash? Those are some of the questions that fractional CFO should be answering. But again, none of that can be complete until we have the basics of the accounting infrastructure in play, meaning that bookkeeping, right, that accounting software, that accounting infrastructure has to be built out at the base. We need a good controller overseeing that, making sure we're scaling properly. Overlay that with a fractional CFO, and we can get you where you want to go.
Yeah, it makes sense. Add to that, Bill. What else do you have to add to that?
Well, I think he said it very well. And, we're big believers in people are kind of along an entrepreneurial journey. And as a business is growing, you tend to layer in those components. And I think that's kind of what Caleb was getting at, is that when you just start out, the bookkeeping tax is what you need. As you're growing and want to become more profitable, say as a solo practice, then you can layer on a controller. A controller is going to look at historic data and metrics and things like that and try to help you become more profitable and optimize. As you're looking at growing, expanding, the conversations, as we mentioned previously, are just different, right? So now we need to start thinking through, how do we strategically make good decisions, and what's the financial impact of those? And that's really where that forward-looking data and analysis comes in. And as Caleb said, those CFO relationships, they should be looked at as if you have a leadership team member. And kind of as you go along the spectrum, for a lot of growing groups, it makes sense to, when you get to that point, to bring that as a fractional relationship. Over time, as you grow, you may need to bring that on, or you might need to bring that on as a full-time position. But that's really the proper infrastructure. There may be some subcomponents of it with accounts payable managers, things like that. But generally speaking, those 3 seats should be able to get you a long way to having a great finance department that you can grow off of.
Yeah. So you hit on the fractional CFO, meaning a lot of other firms, businesses call fractional CFO really what we're calling a fractional controller. I'm not a big fan of these questions, but I get to ask it. When, people out there listening to this, when do I bring on that fractional controller or controller? How, and we'll kind of build up from there, but when do you need that fractional controller or controller in your practice, portfolio of practices, I guess?
Yeah, I think the question, if you're asking yourself, all right, let's just say I've got 3 practices, right? And I'm not going to use the typical CPA answer, it depends. I'm going to give some meat here, right? Call you guys out just a little bit. If we are asking ourselves the question, all right, I've got a couple locations in my portfolio and I'm getting data, right? Good or bad, I'm getting data from my bookkeeper, right? Because that's the base level. No matter what, you have to have a bookkeeper in place.
Got to have data, right? Got to have it.
If I'm getting data, 1, am I able to digest it and make decisions with it on my own?
Good question.
2, if I'm getting data and I can make decisions on my own, but I don't feel like I'm optimized, if either question of that is answered no, it's time to bring a controller in-house. What I mean by that is, if you don't know how to read the data and digest it, historic looking, right? This is all historic looking. If you don't have the ability to interplay ops and finance, right? Because we're not operators. right? We understand what operational metrics should be. How does that interplay into the financials? If you can't do that, or question that, or struggle with that, or are saying, hey, I want to stay in my lane, I know ops, I can build the clinical components of this thing out, but I need someone in my corner to oversee the finance side, it is time to bring on a controller. That person, right, it may not be a CFO seat that is driving financial strategy, and what I mean by that really is growth, forward-looking, but a controller is going to drive financial strategy from a ensuring we are on track to where we want to go. That is the value proposition of a controller, is in-depth analysis to, are we on track to where we want to
go? Yeah, so basically you're getting good data, but you don't know how to interpret it, you don't know how to read it, and you don't know how to make decisions based on that data. And you still want to grow. You want to get better. Like you said, you're not yet optimized. So what's the data telling me, and then what decisions do I make from there? That's
exactly.
Good. Go up one more step then. Let's go to the fractional. Bill, I'll throw it to you here maybe on the fractional CFO piece. So it's like, okay, the fractional controller, let's say that's where you need to add it. How does the CFO, fractional CFO look?
Yeah, so kind of tagging on to what Caleb said, one addition I would have to that is that doesn't have to be a group either. You know, a solo practice can use a good controller that can change their lives too. And with that focus on optimization, we have great controllers here who do awesome work with solos. So I don't want people to think that that's something that's limited to a group practice. Again, the conversations are just different. So I think it is a little bit tougher to know exactly what's the right time to go into, a CFO, because, just to be completely honest, the price point is different. It's going to be higher. So it's going to have an ROI. So typically, if you're in optimization mode and you have good data and you have a controller that's helping you make good decisions, and it's pretty stable, then that's probably a relationship you can ride for a long time. It's when you're really looking at growing, expanding quickly, and your infrastructure is not sufficient from a financial perspective to give you good data to do so, that's when you should start considering a fractional CFO. Do we have a number of practices? Not necessarily. It depends on the size of the practice, the type of the practice, the profitability of the practice, the cash flow that you have. But, we do tend to see that, like, say, for a general dentist practice, that number's probably moving from 3 to, 5 to 8, where it really starts to maybe make more sense from a financial perspective to investment. Yes, from a number of practices from a financial perspective. But again, it just really depends on what the person, I will use the phrase, it depends, Caleb, because it is tougher, but it just depends on where they are in that journey and what barriers or obstacles they have from a financial standpoint, from a financial strategy standpoint, that's going to hold them back from growing. But that's what I would say. You have to have a growth bent to really consider a CFO, in my opinion.
Yeah. So hit on it, Caleb, I think you mentioned this a little bit previously, but as these positions kind of stack on each other, I guess I'll use that term, right? The bookkeeper to the controller to the CFO, also the ability to bring them on fractionally and hire. Talk about the evolution of how that can look, meaning from the bookkeeping up, how that works from maybe having to bring it in-house and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So, at some point, economies of scale and economic benefit, if you continue to grow and scale, there is a point in time that it does not make sense to outsource work, right? You can have an awesome relationship with your CPA firm, even us, right? We firmly believe that there are points in time at which it is time to bring things in-house, right? We had a client this past year we love working with, did the bookkeeping, but they're at a point in their entrepreneurial journey that it makes sense to bring it in-house. So we helped them find a in-house bookkeeper, help get them up to speed and still work with them in a fractional controller and fractional CFO relationship. The components of what goes into actually bringing that in-house, oftentimes it's really the goals of the organization, right? If you are, let's say we're going through an emerging groups client life journey, right? Let's say they start with us at 3 and they've got a goal. I'm just going to throw a number out there. Let's say they want to get up to 20, right? Well, 3 to, I'm going to throw a number out there of 3 to 8, right? At that 8 number, right, we're probably at a point, and Bill kind of threw this out here, we probably have all 3 seats at that point, right? We've got a fractional bookkeeper, fractional controller, fractional CFO on that account. Again, because their ultimate goal is I want to go from 3 to 20. So there's value that all 3 of those seats are driving. Well, let's just say at practice 8, they're at a point where you do a cost analysis of, hey, I'm paying X to outsource. I could pay Y to bring this in-house. Is this a good financial decision? And our job, right, is to bring insight and value to the client. And, if I'm looking at those financials, yeah, guys, it makes sense to actually bring this in-house. You're going to save money, right, by bringing this in-house. And oftentimes, give you a little dirty little secret about in-house bookkeepers, they get financials turned around typically quicker than an outsource does, right? When you have an in-house bookkeeper, they're the only person touching your books and you have full control over their day-to-day, right? So really how I look at this is over time, right, there's going to be a cost-benefit point to which each seat comes in-house, but then also operationally, right? You can go a long way, Bill alluded to this earlier, with a fractional team. You can go a long way with a fractional controller, a heck of a long way with a fractional CFO. We've seen groups out there who can get up to 30 on a fractional CFO. It just depends. I'm going to use it now, right? Just depends on the operation.
It rubs off.
It does. The operational challenges that you're facing. Are you facing problems, right? If you're at 8 and you want to get to 30 in 3 years, you're probably going to need an in-house CFO relatively quickly, right? That is some rapid growth, some rapid scale. You are going to need someone in there. That seat is going to be working more than 50 hours a week in your business, right? So at that point, it makes sense to bring it in-house. But if you're scaling at I'm going to say relatively easy pace, that's really where it comes in on the controller and CFO seat, is the rate at which you're scaling. Velocity. You scale quickly, you need more time allocated to your portfolio.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Bill, you say this all the time kind of on this subject, is our goal, if you will, is you kind of work up the ladder from bookkeeping to controller. If we're doing our job, if you will, we're kind of working ourselves out of the job, right? And allowing us, as we're hitting your goals, we're helping you hit your goals of growing. You bring some of this stuff in-house from a bookkeeping, maybe controller standpoint. That means we're helping you hit your goals. So that's great. One thing I want to emphasize here too, and maybe this is silly saying this, but like since we just formed, I guess I should say, this specific emerging groups department, that does not mean this is the first time we're working with emerging groups. We've worked with groups for years. Now we're just getting really niched on it, and a department solely specifically focused on it. Bill, I'm going to throw it to you and just maybe unpack. Don't name any names, client names or anything like that if you don't mind, but just like maybe go through a client that, let's just say we did a fractional CFO client, right? Walk through maybe some of their, when they came in, what were their pain points, where their issues were, and we'll toot our own horn a little bit. Like, how did we help them? How did we help them get better?
Yeah, so we have a great example of this that Caleb and I just had a fun meeting today, because it was kind of the end result of something we've been working towards for a long time. So this client comes to us and they have a great bookkeeper who's doing good work, but they don't really know what they know, but they don't know what they don't know regarding financial reporting. So they've kind of cobbled together reporting processes that just were cumbersome, hard to understand, not consolidated, not really in a way that was extremely meaningful. So, one of our first steps was we got to figure out how to standardize the financial reporting so we can have good data. In conjunction with that, the businesses were really good businesses, but there was, in our opinions, a shortage of cash on hand. Upon analysis, it was because that cash was being used to actively fund expansion, and so it was constantly in kind of cash crunches. So through our once we kind of got the stabilization of the financials and could see what's going on and had visibility there, then our conversations, these are great operators, by the way, were, okay, you guys know what to focus on. So as you're focusing on this, we're starting to see improved results. We're starting to see more cash. We're having strategic conversations about how to use that cash, which is a whole another series we could talk through. But let's make sure that number one, we have sufficient cash on hand, because we have a period of somewhat economic uncertainty in this market that they're in. And we fought tooth and nail to get a reasonable cash reserve, Caleb. They pushed back a little bit, didn't think they could get there. But with intentionality, they got there. We're able to start doing profit distributions, have great cash reserves on hand to weather any storm. And we've now kind of shifted our focus to, okay, we've got great cash, so now we got two other problems. We've got FDIC limitations, so we need to make sure that we're having cash management conversations about getting diversified to mitigate that risk. But more importantly, we have a lot of cash that we can put to work in a passive portfolio manner that earns a little return while it's sitting there. And that was kind of the conversation that we went from, we don't even have anywhere near enough cash, to now we've got well into the seven figures of cash that we could put to work and start working on some cash or treasury management, whatever you want to call it, strategies. So we have this cash that's not only liquid and available, but it's earning a return and is available if we want to act rapidly on opportunities, or if, heaven forbid, a black swan event happens. So it just was really cool to see. And I think the owner is just extremely blown away by the feeling of having the structure, the data, the ability to have people to bounce ideas off to make good decisions, and then the ability to see that culminate in a really healthy business with a great cash position that he can rest easy. He's in a good spot now. So that was just kind of one example of taking someone who had enough that was kind of getting them good results, decent results, and helping them take it to the next level.
Yeah, so just curious, let's say this specific client or the services, Caleb, you talked about here, like how often are you meeting with these clients? Like what's that look like? What are the touch points, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so that specific client is a fractional CFO relationship where they have an in-house bookkeeper. So on that specific account, right, I'm currently serving as the fractional controller, Bill's serving as the fractional CFO, and what those touch points look like are, the client technically gets 4 touch points a month with unlimited access. And what I mean by that is myself and the bookkeeper, week 1, gets the books prepared. Those get reviewed by me. We're good. We issue financials. Second week of the month, we actually meet, right? So we'll go through our monthly financial review, get into some of the in-depth components of the service, right? Enterprise rankings, looking at cash management, treasury management, just like Bill was talking about. And for the last, year and a half or so, it was all centered around stacking cash. Well, now that we've got to that point, our conversations are vastly different. The CFO on that relationship, is meeting with their COO mid-month, right, to work on forecasting, right? So really the client's getting 2 facets, right? He's getting that controller oversight of the historic component, right? Going back to my infrastructure talk of we've got eyes on the financial data, making sure that's good, but then we've also got the forward-looking component. So Bill on that account is meeting with that COO, making sure everything from ops is running smoothly and efficiently, and we're plugging that into our forecast and how's that going to affect cash. Week 4, we meet with them, have any strategic conversations we need to have as a leadership team, right? Any issues, not just in the finance department of the business, but also talking through, one of the components, Bill, we talked through today is marketing and driving new patients and things like that. So it's really a holistic approach, and that's what I want most people to understand is, finance is changing, right? We are going far away from the days of your accountant getting you numbers once a month, talking to them once a year, and that's it, right? We are getting into a world where finance is going to lead company decisions, strategic decisions, in how companies grow. What I mean by that is going to be in conjunction with ops and marketing, right? Those 3 legs we talked about earlier. But if you don't have the right person in the finance, it doesn't have to be us, but you need to have a good person leading your financial department, ensuring that you've got that third leg of the bar stool moving the company forward.
Yeah, so very hands-on. I mean, Bill, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to add on to that. We've started adopting a phrase, Caleb and I have, which is, how quickly are we getting feedback loops? I know that's kind of a buzzword too, but once we crystallize it in our head, that tells us how quickly we can make sure that what needs to be focused on, what initiatives are being pursued, are they working or not? And so in our highest level, like Caleb says, we have 4 feedback loops that are all within a week, making sure that we're tracking on the appropriate data. And with other relationships that maybe aren't as grown as fast and maybe aren't quite at that level, we may have 2 feedback loops. And then, with other controllers, which is more of an optimization, maybe a 1 feedback loop a month. The goal is to always have a constant monitoring of the data and the initiatives. And really what that does is it allows discussion around how, if there's problems, we can remove obstacles together or solve problems together. But also, if it's not getting done, it creates a level of accountability within the organization. So we find that clients really like that as well. It just creates some accountability, kind of towards the ops team to take the data that's being provided and interpret it together, make initiatives, and see those through to completion. So that's just another way we've kind of crystallized it, Jared. Something that as you're evaluating a controller relationship or CFO is what are the feedback loops that are pushing change and driving initiatives forward.
That's good, man. I mean, the service is powerful. I mean, you mentioned, Caleb, we'll go back to you, like the 4 touch points. That last touch point, that fractional CFO, forward-looking forecast projections, I was going to say that's what nobody is meeting on. Very few people are actually meeting on that. And there's the forward-looking stuff. I mean, say it all the time, it's cheesy, right? That's why the windshield is so big compared to the rearview mirror. Not going to say what's in the rearview mirror is not important. It is. But where you're going is even more important. You know what I mean? And that's the power of the service. So, I mean, we could dive into all kinds of things. You said some things there, Caleb, like contribution margin and something else you said that we could dive into. But I want to, that's for a later day, if that makes sense. I think we can get a lot of dive deeper and deeper. I want us to kind of bring us home, Caleb, on maybe if that group practice owner, let's just say that 3+ practice owner out there right now that's really, say they want to grow and it's just extremely overwhelming for them right now. It's extremely chaotic. They don't know where they're at. They don't know their finances. What questions should they be asking themselves based on what you just kind of said?
Yeah, so first and foremost, right, is am I getting the data I need to make decisions? We don't have that, we can't move forward, we can't do anything, right? And solos too, right? This isn't necessarily just geared toward the 3+. I know the question was 3+, but any dental owner, anyone who owns a business, if you're not getting good data, that is the absolute, right, or what we use BAM, bare ass minimum, what you need every single month. If you're not getting good data in a fashion that's timely, right, in a fashion that's digestible, right, we have the SPEED acronym, Jared, right, that we always use.
Yep.
If we're not getting that monthly, that's the first step, right? First step is where are we at? From there, that's where we kind of elevate up to that second question, and really the questions I was asking, you ask yourself for a control relationship. Okay, I have the data. Am I able to digest this? Am I able to make decisions on my own? Am I able to grow this thing, without the help of a finance seat? That's where you start to elevate. But unless we have that baseline, getting speed financials every month, without that we can't do anything.
Yeah, makes sense. Bill, bring us home, man. What are the thoughts that are going through your head as we kind of wrap this up?
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, we pride ourselves in this firm of always trying to be as innovative as possible, always trying to keep our ears to the ground as far as like, what do people asking for? What do they want? How can we make our clients' lives better? How can we create great opportunities for people like Caleb to step into leadership roles in our firm? And, this was one that was a very natural, logical step. We saw that they had different issues. They congregated in different spaces. And in those spaces they talked in a different language, so to speak, in a lot of ways. And so it just was, something that when it was kind of formulated and brought up, it just made a ton of sense. We have a lot of clients out there we had worked with, and when we made the decision to go niche, the thought was we go deep. And I think Caleb said it just perfectly: is we're niching within the niche, and so it's even a deeper vein, and that will allow that team to focus on these groups and their issues and what they're seeing, and then the solos to focus on those. And that's just kind of a really great addition to our firm, and just really proud of the work Caleb's put into it. It's something that I think is going to be really special, and it's going to make a lot of our clients' lives a lot better.
100%. I mean, another stupid analogy I was thinking through, it's kind of like fishing off the side of the ocean, if you will, and then going out deep sea fishing. It's a different type of fishing.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to think differently as different issues arise. So, no, I'm excited. I mean, Emerging Groups Department is off and running again. We've been dealing with groups for years, but now we got our team. That's the most important thing. Like, our team internally here at Duckett Ladd, like, they specifically work for, whatever department, and they just see, let's say, emerging groups all day long, if that makes sense. And again, I want to emphasize, not going away from the solos. We're just getting really laser focused on where we're at. So, Caleb, I appreciate you jumping on here, man. And if you guys out there have any questions on how the emerging groups team can help us, we're here to help and hopefully make you guys better. So, Bill, appreciate you too, man.
You got it.
We'll see you guys.
You bet.